I need food now. If you're one of those people that like your identity is linked to being hangry, this podcast is for you. Or it's really, really simple and it goes like this. All right, that's the one we don't want to be on. That's the 𝗖𝗟𝗜 scary, shitty one. Don't get on that ride. There's a lot of internal things that are going on that people don't really think about because we're such visual creatures. We don't think, oh, the reason my nails are brittle is because what's going on internally. We really don't think about that. And that's something that we need to kind of start to make a correlation to, but it's okay. You'll be healthy because you're skinny. Lifestyle intervention works better than prescription drugs. Hello, welcome back to Wellth Body Radio. I'm your host, 𝗖𝗟𝗜𝗄, nutritional therapy consultant and real life human being. Going through the shit, just like you. Trying to figure out what's true, what's not, what works, what doesn't. Where is the common sense in the world? You know? So, this is our part of the world where we can kind of figure that out, where we can have expansive conversations, dialogue, figuring it out, sussing it out, and really figuring out what works for you, what works to empower you to regain that gut intuition so that you can move more confidently through this messy world. I also want to mention that everything in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not medical advice. Regardless of what I say, please do your own research. Please talk to your own professional medical team, all that jazz. Okay? Don't just take my word for it, but do get curious about what my word might bring up in you. Alrighty, let's get started. Jumping into today's podcast, we're going to be talking about the roller coaster that I know so many people have been on. I have been on it days in, days out. It literally feels like you can never get off. But I'm talking about the energy crash ride roller coaster. It is the one that screws up with your energy, obviously. It screws up with your hormones. It screws up with your period, your mood, your friendships, your sleep. It really just messes up it all, right? So I know that a lot of people have been here where you might like relate to this as well, where you feel like after you have a big meal, you just want to sleep it off. You don't feel like going back to work. You don't feel like getting up off the couch and hanging out with your kids, going for a walk, doing all that. You just want to like veg out. Or also might be that person that absolutely cannot live without that midday coffee, or you're taking a nap face down at your keyboard. And lastly, you might be, and this is the kind of the team I'm on, the camp I was in, was the unexplainable binges and cravings where I could not get away from needing to eat more, like having a sweet carbohydrate and then after that being like, oh my God, I'm so hungry 20 minutes later, and then going for like a savory carbohydrate, and then there's like this cycle continuously repeating itself, and these cravings that would like hit me out of nowhere, like I'm fine, and then all of a sudden it's like, bam, I'm not. I need food now. And that's also what we call being hangry. If you're one of those people that like your identity is linked to being hangry, this podcast is for you. Turn off your cell phones. That's always what they tell you to do. That's what you should always do. Okay, so let's start off with what even is a roller coaster of energy, crashes and highs and lows and all of that. What does it? Why does it happen? And why does it happen when I eat specific foods, aka carbohydrates, aka the foods that we all love? So when you eat a carbohydrate, it gets broken down into glucose. Glucose is a form of energy. The energy is then what sets you off on this roller coaster. So sometimes that energy is complex enough that your roller coaster is kind of like this, or it's really, really simple and it goes like this. All right? That's the one we don't want to be on. That's the 𝗖𝗟𝗜𝗄 scary, shitty one. Don't get on that ride. What happens when you eat carbohydrates is after a meal or snack, the carbs are broken down in your digestive tract and changed into, like I said, glucose. That glucose is then transported to your bloodstream through the lining of your small intestine, And then once that glucose is in the bloodstream, move it around, insulin gets signals to your cells to like open up to get this glucose into the cell so they can be used as energy. If you have too much, the body then signals, alrighty, we need to put this somewhere else. And then it goes to your liver, which is a really large storage area for energy, or it goes into your muscles. Lastly, if both of those stores are filled up, it gets turned into fat and it becomes adipose tissue. So side note, this is why working out is so important. If you are having these energy crashes, highs and lows, you don't feel really good after you eat, exercise is going to be your best friend. And I know everybody knows they should move more, exercise more, everyone's heard it, but it really is how humans are made to be. It's really important to have healthy muscle tissue so that glucose can get put in there and repurposed, recycled, blah, blah, blah. And then as you're building muscle, you're also creating larger storage bunkers for the glucose to go, which is great because then as you eat more, you'll feel like if you eat carbohydrates, you'll feel better because like there's more places for this energy to be stored. Okay. I hope that makes sense. So the problem that most people are going to face, and especially like, I feel like my mom, like her generation and my generation, if you're like in your late 20s and like older, you probably know what I'm talking about when we talk about like the food pyramid where it's like eat 12 servings of grains per day. Why that was a recommendation? Well, it was paid for, so that's why it was a recommendation. It was paid off, money shoveled around to come to this conclusion that this would be the way for ultimate health for most people to eat. And it actually is terrible advice. And 12 servings of grains is a lot of carbohydrates, regardless if they're complex or simple. So your complex are going to have more fiber, right, in them, and your simple are going to have less fiber. And when you have this much carbohydrates in your diet, you're going to need to be eating more often than not. And I also remember hearing growing up the term 6 meals a day. You want to keep your metabolism running as if it ever shut off. You're not a car. Your metabolism is always running. Your metabolism is made up of everything that's happening in your body is your metabolism. It is not just related to gaining weight or losing weight. But I feel like that's how most people think of their metabolism, is that weight in, weight out, that's metabolism. No, it's literally your entire being. Okay? So when you are grazing all day to keep your metabolism running, what you're really doing is keeping your insulin really high. That's an issue. Again, we talked about that roller coaster. Every time you eat, especially when it's poor quality carbohydrates, you're getting that boost of energy. And it could be a really, really steep one, and what goes up has to come down, right? So you see those big highs and big lows. When your insulin stays high all day, you're having those big peaks and you're constantly grazing, you're eating, you're not stopping to have a full meal. Instead, you're just like a snacky, picky person all day. You're keeping your insulin elevated. When that insulin stays elevated, you're constantly putting that glucose into those storage places we talked about, your liver, your muscles, and your adipose tissue. If you're not using up the energy in your muscles and your liver and stuff like that, then when those stay full, especially because you're sitting all day grazing, it is going to get shuffled into that adipose tissue. And that's where you're going to see a lot of weight gain, especially around the tummy area usually. And that is where people want to lose the most weight. That's the most place that people do not want to hold weight. But that's what happens all day when you're grazing. Okay, so we need to eliminate that habit, and we need to focus on complex carbohydrates, protein, and fat 3 to 4 times a day, okay? Spaced out 5 to 6 hours per meal. And that is going to give you a really nice lull all throughout the day of energy. That's what you want. We don't want those big highs and those big crashes, right? And we'll get more into later on in the podcast about which foods have, give off a bigger high and which foods give off, smaller lulls, and what you want to be eating to feel really, really good throughout the day. So jumping into the saying, I only live once. I did a whole podcast on that. You can watch it here about how you live every single day and you only die once. So I think it's a piss poor mentality to be like, oh, what the heck? I only live once, so I'm going to eat whatever I want. Why would you want to live a shitty life? Why? Nobody wants a shitty life, right? Right. So when you say, whatever, I just live once, so you eat the chips, you drink the beer, you have the ice cream, and you don't really care about what that's doing internally, it's still expressing itself externally. You're going to get the aging, you're going to feel run down, your hair is going to feel gross, your nails are not going to be as nice, right? Our body composition isn't going to be how we want it to be. But there are ways to eat the things that we want to eat in moderation, at intentional indulgent moments that are going to be better for us. And that is going to be what we call clothed carbohydrates. And I'm going to be talking more about that in the next episode, the part 2 of this. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. Okay, so I know I'm going to get some heat for this podcast, for this topics that I choose to dabble in, because honestly, some people are just so married to their diet that they cannot see beyond that. They cannot see what they're doing, what they love so much is actually causing them harm long term. And the irony is that I was there too. It's taken me a whole decade, trial and error, to learn everything that I know about what I was doing to what I'm doing now, how I was feeling then and how I'm feeling now. Light years difference. And that's all I'm trying to do, is to share a different perspective for those struggling with their current ways. And when those people intuitively feel like something's not right, I'm hoping this podcast lands there. If that's you, again, I'm so thankful you're listening. Please share this podcast because there might be more people in your life that are like you, that are struggling, that are just not vocal about it. And them seeing this podcast, seeing that it helped you, might help them. And that's how we create a ripple effect of good in the world. And honestly, and if you don't like this podcast, stop engaging with it because you're screwing up the algorithm. All right? All right. Okay, let's get back to the show. Thanks, guys. And like I said, all these things, when you're eating these poor quality foods just because you only live once, just because you can, and it expresses itself externally as all the negative things I just listed, there's a lot of internal things that are going on that people don't really think about. Because we're such visual creatures, we don't think, oh, the reason my nails are brittle is because what's going on internally. We really don't think about that. And that's something that we need to kind of start to make a correlation to. So when you have high insulin all the time, again, that grazing, having multiple snacks, really low protein meals, poor quality fats in your meals, and just paired with high processed carbohydrates, the consequences of that is that it is actually decreasing the receptor sites on cells. And a healthy cell has around 200,000 insulin receptor sites on it. So that means your body's really good at, when you take in carbohydrates, going like, okay, we need to do something with this. We need to put it somewhere. It knows what to do. When you consume all the time, especially processed carbohydrates, and that's where the push for this vegan diet really irks me, is because people aren't replacing meat with high quality vegetables or high quality vegan or vegetarian protein sources. They're replacing them with like Beyond Burgers and fries. No, that's an issue. Why I don't believe in like a vegan vegetarian diet. And you can have a different opinion than me. That's fine. That's great. But for me, the way I look at it is that when you change out proteins and fats for more carbohydrates, again, you're getting that higher insulin. The insulin receptor sites, your body gets worn out from being used literally all the time. And those insulin receptor sites decrease to 2,000. 2,000. So a healthy cell has 200,000 insulin receptor sites. That means every time you take in carbohydrates, it knows what to do with it. It can signal, it can put it everywhere. It's perfect. When it gets used and abused, that decreases to 2,000 receptor sites. And that means you become more insulin resistant and have a loss of insulin sensitivity. This is what leads to pre-diabetic and ultimately diabetes. And that pre-diabetic period is where you actually start to see a lot of manifestation of different kinds of diseases. So you're going to see things like weight gain, especially again around that belly midsection. You're going to see high blood pressure, high triglyceride levels, low HDL cholesterol, the good cholesterol, and you're going to ultimately be insulin resistant. And you're going to feel like you need to keep eating more carbohydrates to get the same bang for your buck as per when it was healthy cells. When you could get away with eating less, get that energy boost. But now you might feel that I need to eat more carbohydrates. I'm not getting that energy from it, right? Because energy is glucose. Glucose comes from carbs. Well, energy comes from all food sources, but that's kind of the progression. So when you progress from type or pre-diabetic, then you progress to type 2 diabetic, there's even more sickness. People just think, I've become type 2 diabetic. I can take my insulin shot and live my life as is, but that's really not the case. Your body is fighting itself. It's in distress. And the other things that come with type 2 diabetes are I can say that word. I don't know why I can't right now. Cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, kidney disease, fatty liver disease, cancer, immune dysfunction, poor wound healing, foot ulcers, blindness, depression, Alzheimer's disease. All that comes with type 2 diabetes, which comes from being pre-diabetic, which comes from poor carbohydrate regulation, right? Poor metabolic health, poor dietary choices. Literally, the choice is in your hand. So despite what your doctor might tell you, again, this is my opinion, not medical advice, but your doctor might be like, hey, just take this drug. It's called metformin. It'll help you manage your diabetes or help you manage your weight. The symptoms, the consequences of this are going to be diarrhea, constipations, extreme stomach cramping, migraines, but it's okay. You'll be healthy because you're skinny. No. There is a large study that showed that lifestyle interventions reduce the incidence of diabetes by 58% as compared to 31% reduction in patients taking metformin. So even taking a prescription drug and continuing your lifestyle, you were worse off than if you just changed your lifestyle and took no drug. That's pretty cool. So again, the power comes back to just learning what the body does with the food you eat, what food you should eat, and feeling more empowered. Okay, so we're talking about lifestyle intervention works better than prescription drugs. So where do we start? How do we change? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. There are some key lifestyle changes that you can make today. Literally, it's all almost all for free. That's the amazing part. And that's why your doctor or any big pharma is not going to suggest these things to you, because they don't make money off of it. The world goes round because of money. I said it in my last podcast, money, 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 money. So do the things that are for free and you're literally beating the system. Okay. So the first thing you're going to want to do is consume a whole food, low glycemic diet, like complex carbohydrates. And we're going to talk more about low glycemic and what all that means in the next little section. So here we go. We're talking about making sure each meal is also rich in essential fatty acids and high quality protein. High quality protein is going to be animal protein. Your essential fatty acids are going to come from fatty fish, cod liver oil, avocados, right? Your extra virgin olive oil, all fantastic. You're going to want to avoid all refined grains and sugars, especially if you're trying to restore your insulin sensitivity. Now, this isn't a restrict forever. You can never have cake at your kid's birthday ever again, but it's going to be in your daily life throughout the whole entire month. You're going to avoid it for the most part. And then, when Easter comes around, you're going to have dessert after a nice meal consistent of animal protein, healthy fats, some fiber salad in there, and then you're going to have a treat. That's once in a while, right? Most of the time we need to be avoiding refined carbohydrates like your cereals, your quick oats, the white breads, even the brown breads are pretty refined, right? They're not that great for you. We're going to avoid refined pastas and refined desserts and ice creams and stuff like that. And just lowering our simple processed carbohydrate consumption and overall sugar consumption. And again, we're going to be talking about in the next podcast about the clothed carb strategy, which is going to help you in those situations learn how to eat carbohydrates that are more processed, more refined, in how to avoid the big highs and the big lows, the big roller coaster that we're trying to get off of while still enjoying those things in life that we want to enjoy. One of the big things is that you want to start eating breakfast within the first hour of rising. That is going to break the cycle, like break your fast, reduce your cortisol, and then set you up really, really good for the rest of the day to have like cognitive clarity and to feel better, to not consume an extra amount of caffeine, and then again get on this big bad roller coaster. You're going to want to exercise 30 to 60 minutes per day, moving cortisol through the body, moving glucose through the body, like forcing your body to break down old muscle tissue to make it new and stronger. That's great. That's going to increase your longevity. And we also want to incorporate some kind of stress management into the day. That can be journaling, dancing, talking with a loved one, watching the sunset, laying on the floor, staring at the ceiling, listening to your favorite song. Whatever you have to do just to is going to be great. Okay? So let's jump into the low glycemic foods. What is a glycemic index? Why is it important? So there are a number of factors that influence the glycemic index of a food. And a glycemic index refers to the value of a food. The quicker the rate of like your blood sugar rises after ingesting it as compared to the absorption of 50 grams of pure glucose. Okay, so we're comparing pure glucose to a specific food. And the higher the number, the higher the glycemic index. The lower the number, the lower the glycemic index. So pure glucose has a reference number of 100. And then there are going to be a lot of factors that influence whether the food you consume becomes higher or lower than that reference number, than that value of 100. So it's going to be the type of sugar in your food. So there's a misconception that all sugars have a high index or glycemic index, and you would assume so. Like, glucose is sugar. You would assume that all sugar is high, but it depends on if there's fiber in there, if there's the structure of the structure of the starch and stuff like that. So things like fruit, everyone thinks that fruit is bad because it's a sugar, but actually most fruit can range as low as 23 on the glycemic index because it contains a sugar that has fructose, and it also has a lot of fiber in it, right? So that's going to lower the rate of absorption as compared to 105 value for maltose. And maltose is a type of sugar that's going to be found in like wheat, cornbread, barley, a lot of your grains, or it gets extracted because it's a sweetener input into like donuts and bagels and like any of your doughs kind of thing. So that is going to have, again, a value of 105. So that's even more than just pure glucose, which is kind of crazy to think about. And again, it comes back to reminding yourself, like, how refined is this item that I'm eating? If it's more refined, it's most likely going to have a higher glycemic index. So it's going to raise you up on that roller coaster pretty quickly, get you to that peak before you crash down. There's going to be things that are less obvious. Obviously, donuts or cupcakes are obvious ones. They're super refined, full of sugar, right? But things that are less obvious are going to be quick oats. And quick oats are actually the refined product of steel cut oats. So your steel cut oats are going to have a lower glycemic index because they're in their whole form. They have not been fucked with. And your your rolled oats have been like flattened, and the fibers have been like broken up and they've been grinded down. So that actually increases their absorbability. So that's going to, again, spike you higher than what steel cut oats would have. And then we want to think about, is this carbohydrate paired with a protein or fat? When protein or fat is present with a carbohydrate, it automatically drops the glycemic index because it slows that digestion right down. The cooking method also changes the glycemic index. And then I want you to think about like a raw potato versus mashed potato. Mashed potato is going to be, again, cooked. All the starches are going to be broken down, so more readily accessible as they're digesting. They're going to be like crushed up, right? So again, just a mush a starch that your body can easily absorb versus eating a raw, uncooked potato. I don't know if you've ever had a bite of raw, uncooked potato. I have. It's not good. But again, it's going to be much harder for the body to break that down in its raw form. All of the fiber structures are still intact. So the cooking method, again, the longer the food is cooked, the faster its sugars can be digested and absorbed, raising the glycemic index of that food. So cooking and cooling is actually a little hack that you can use. So any potato or like sweet potato or rice or grains, when you cook it, cool it down and then reheat it. That cooling process creates what we call resistance starch, which has a hard time. It's being resisted from being broken down. It actually makes it to your gut microbiome, your large intestine there, and the little buddies that are in there feeding off of it are going to be super, super happy. So that is a really good tip, that if you want to keep consuming, if you only want to make micro changes to your diet, like cutting potatoes out might be like the scariest thing in the world. Cook it, cool it, and then reheat it. And then work from that point. Meet yourself where you need to be met in order to make these positive changes until you can move on the scale to like better and better choices, right? Right. So ripeness. The ripeness of a fruit also makes a really big difference. So a green banana is going to have, again, more resistant starch here versus a like brown spotty banana that you would use for like banana bread, because it's obviously way more sweeter in its spotty brown form versus the green form. So again, when your fruit is riper, it has a higher glycemic index. So choosing unripe fruit at that point is a really good choice. And one of my favorite things about science is that there's a lot emerging on the gut microbiome, and the healthier your gut microbiome is, so that's all the bacteria that lives in your gut, the better at managing your blood glucose you have. So that is excellent. So again, everything I discussed is very bio-individual. It might work for you and it might not. And that could be based off of the quality of bacteria that's living in your gut. But that is something that you can progressively change. So exercise, like eating fermented foods like sauerkraut or fermented beets, pickles, having like naturally fermented kombucha, watching out for the sugar and the fake ones, and introducing possibly a probiotic if you work with like a naturopath and they prescribe you a good one. Even doing a gut stool analysis can all help you determine what the quality of your gut is and which direction you should move in to improve it further. And then doing that improvement can ultimately leave you better at digesting these foods, at handling them, which again would improve your roller coaster ride to being something a lot more docile and more enjoyable. So the important thing there to take away from that is to make sure you listen to your body. Figure out what works best for you. Keep a journal, a diary of the food you're eating, how good you feel. Did you have diarrhea after? Are you constipated after? How was your energy? How was your irritability? Were you happy, joyful? Write all of that down. It's all connected, okay? Alrighty, so let's quickly dive into the foods I would most recommend for managing your roller coaster of carbohydrates energy level. So the first few ones are going to have few or no carbs in them at all. Therefore, they don't have like a glycemic index value. They're not going to spike up. And that's going to be your high quality animal proteins, your fish, seafoods, so tuna, prawns, sardines, salmons, chicken, beef, pork, eggs, all those are great. Your nuts, avocados, cashews, macadamia nuts, a Brazil nut once a day, your fats and oils, which is olive oil, butter, ghee, coconut oil, avocado. Your herbs and spices, especially fresh herbs, are excellent and they taste so good. They're so impactful in your cooking, and it'll make your healthy cooking taste 10 times better than just using the dried preserved version. So definitely go out and get yourself some fresh herbs. If you're dabbling in healthy cooking and you think it tastes boring, life-changing, okay? The lower glycemic foods are going to be things like your apples, strawberries, blueberries, bananas, kiwis, pears, tomatoes, technically avocados, limes, lemons. Your vegetables are going to include like broccoli, cauliflower, zucchini, celery, carrots, We got starchy vegetables, like squashes or yams or sweet potatoes. We have your legumes, which are going to be lentils, chickpeas, butter beans, kidney beans, wild rice, brown rice, and then we have grains such as like quinoa and barley. We got dairy and dairy replacements, so that's going to be your whole milk, preferably raw if you can, that's amazing. Unsweetened Greek yogurt, coconut milk. And for your breads, if you're a diehard bread person, and again, you need to transition from something not so healthy to a little bit healthier so that you can eventually transition out to not having it every single day, I'm going to recommend like a whole seedy bread. So lots of seeds, lots of grains in it. Some like rye bread or sourdough, traditionally fermented sourdough. That one's going to be mint. And then for breakfast cereals, 𝗖𝗟𝗜𝗖𝗍, all the Kellogg's, we're just going to go for steel cut oats, okay? And does this mean that you can never have ice cream again? No. Again, in the next podcast, part 2 of this, we're going to be talking about how you can have ice cream in a healthy way and not compromise on what kind of ice cream you're having, how your lifestyle is, and how to enjoy it all, okay? I really hope this podcast gave you some clarity on why you're having highs and lows in energy levels, what happens if you continue down that path, and what foods you should be choosing, what lifestyles, like methods you could be applying that will make you feel better. At the end of the day, everybody wants to look good, but when you take that away, when you peel that back, everybody really just wants to feel good. Feel good inside and out. And this, like what you put in your body, the fuel you put in your body makes a big difference, okay? As always, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you loved it. Please don't forget to subscribe. Please share this podcast. I'm trying to grow it, trying to cut through the bullshit and just have honest conversations like Auntie Alicia and you talking, bettering ourselves, bettering our lives. That's all I want to do. And don't forget to show up in the world a little bit more curious, a little bit more intentional, and a lot more loving. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for listening. As always, bye.